Well, hey, today on the show, we have a co-host of the Florida Man on Florida Man podcast, great friend of mine. We're going to be talking about podcasting and just all things in that area. Let's welcome to the show, Wayne McCarty. Wayne, thanks for being on the show, man.
Of course, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you, dude. It's fun. I love, we're homies. We've also known each other for a while, and dude, I'm just pumped to talk to you today.
A long time coming, man.
Yeah,
I feel
man.
like because your show's doing well, and I think that it's always fun. It's a boost, I think, to me when my homies are doing like really awesome creative stuff. It's always like it's an unspoken motivator.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like my homies are going for it. Like I got to keep going for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and vice versa too. Like you were obviously super encouraging to me and starting the show up and everything. And it was a dream that I've had for a little bit, but seeing you, like knowing you prior to the podcast too, and seeing you guys go for it, and a lot of our friends out there that are just like going for it right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Like is encouraging to me of like, oh man, like there's momentum. I don't know. It just feels like momentum that kind of is like contagious. You know what I mean?
It is. And there's a backdraft to, I think, creative energy to where like when your homies are doing it and you're around that, there's an inspiration that maybe you don't even realize you're picking up on, but you feel it in your bones, man. Like it makes you want to do it more. But I agree with you. It is contagious.
Yeah, for sure. And even in like across different forms of creativity, I feel like our homie Chase Wagner, who's putting out songs, and by the time, it's already come out by the time this comes out. But like his song, Dagobah System.
Yeah,
dude,
it's
like,
so sick.
Listen to it over and over, and dude, my son loves it.
Same.
I told Leo that it was about Star Wars.
Yeah.
And every time we get in the car, he's like, play the Star Wars song.
Yeah.
So I'll play it once, and he's like, Dad, play it again.
Yeah.
It's like he's
On
kind of
repeat.
threatening me a little bit, but yeah.
It is funny because I especially with Chase, we're both musicians, and it's kind of like one of those things where it's rude to geek out over a homie. But he's got a couple songs on his newest record that like I genuinely enjoy.
Dude, yeah.
And not from a like, oh, I'm supporting my friend, but like, no, this is a great song, and my daughters are the same way. They want to hear. He has a song called "World Stop Spinning."
Yeah.
And both my girls, it's on their playlist, and it's so cool to see their homies come over and spend the night, and like they're jamming to like my homie. You know what I mean?
For sure.
It's a cool
Yeah,
vibe.
man. And it's cool to like. There are those moments where you have homies where you're like, man, I'm just doing this for supportive. But it's also like, dude, if I didn't even know you,
Right.
I would listen to this. And it's cool that I do know you.
It's a
'cause
great
like,
compliment.
I know you're, I know you're going somewhere.
Yeah,
with
it's a
this.
great compliment.
Well, dude, man, I'm excited to talk a little bit tonight. Dude, you're looking great, man. You
Thanks,
feeling great?
dude.
Yeah.
I feel good, man.
Yeah.
I'm 39. I'll be 40 next year, and I feel better than ever. And so part of me, I guess the anxious, insecure part of me goes, something's about to come. You know what I mean? It's all about to fall apart, sir.
What's about to happen? Dude, yeah, I've gotten to that point, and I'm 30. I'm about to be 32.
Yeah.
So not there yet, but like I've just had those moments lately where I've realized like my body can't do what it used to do.
Sure.
The other night I had dinner, like we just had a lot going on, and I had dinner at like closer to 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And my next day was awful.
Yeah.
Dude,
Yeah.
I just felt like somebody had like, I woke up in the morning and somebody just punched me in the gut and was like, have a great
Your
Monday.
esophagus was like, hey,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Like, dude, it's funny because my wife, bless her heart, man, and she's gorgeous. And in my 20s, I was in shape. I was in competitive shape, and like I would kiss me. You know what I mean?
I'd be into me.
Yeah, I was confident, and then I sometimes I look at myself now, and I don't struggle in the confidence area, but I do have a dad bod more than I did back in the day, and I found myself apologizing to my wife a lot more, just like, hey,
I'm so
sorry
sorry
about
for
that, like my bad, dude.
Well, dude, I will say this. I'm very jealous of the mustache. Like you,
Oh, thank you.
That probably helps bring things together. Dude, I could not. I have a full beard like this. I love painting pictures like this for an audio podcast.
Yeah, right.
But like,
Close your eyes.
Yeah, close your eyes and just imagine.
Yeah, can you hear my mustache?
Good looking man with a mustache.
Yeah.
But dude, I could not pull it. I've tried it before.
Yeah.
And I do not have I just don't have a jawline. So like it just looks like half of my face was cut off. You know what I mean? When I shaved my beard, it's like what happened to
what
this guy?
accident were you in?
Yeah.
Well, dude, it's funny because I've got pretty thick skin. I've been in entertainment for a long time, and people have said terrible things about me online, and you kind of get used to it. So the mustache is over a decade old. And what's funny is with fashion or any kind of style, things are cyclical. So there have been seasons where the mustache is hot. And people are like, "Oh, congratulations!" And then there are other seasons
for you,
where people are like, "Hey, like call the cops. This guy's got a mustache."
Yeah.
So, but yeah, man, I think consistency is king when it comes to facial hair. It's what I've learned.
If you just rock something for long enough, it just becomes of like who you are.
Yeah, I don't know that my daughters. I mean, neither one of my daughters have ever seen me without a mustache.
Yeah.
So, and my oldest is almost 11. So I think if I were to shave it now, there would need to be a talk beforehand. They would need to be in the room with me, I think, when I shaved it off.
It's a family meeting. It's like, hey, listen, this is what I've thought about doing for a while.
My mustache will probably outlive my wife's 15-year-old increpid dog. But it would be the same type of like mourning if it ever went.
I don't know if I believe that, dude. I think that dog is here forever.
Man, some backstory. My wife's
growing stronger.
My wife's got a poodle that is just found the fountain of youth and partook from that cup because he is unbelievably strong. It's ridiculous,
dude. Yeah, dude. There's one time only one of my kids has seen me without a beard, and it was because I kind of just like, you're shaving, and maybe it's different for you because I have the full beard, but it was like I was shaving and just kind of nicked, and I was like, well, where do I go from here?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't do like Wolverine. What do I do? You know what I mean?
So I tell everyone I have alopecia.
Yeah, it's just like it'll grow back. I promise. So I just like chopped the whole thing off.
Sure.
And there was a few moments where he was also really young. So I don't think he remembers that. But dude, I just couldn't do it. I have no chin. I have no facial structure. I look like I was in an accident. Like
it really is, man. Like one of those things. And I think for a lot of dads, I remember growing up and my dad having a stash and then he went through like this goatee stage where we didn't speak, and then like, and then it was like
trying time.
Yeah, and then it was just like, but the dad always had something, but there was one season where he shaved it off, and I was like, something's not right.
Yeah, dude, my dad had a goatee for a little bit, and I look back on those pictures, and I was like, you look like you were into some stuff, man.
Oh yeah,
you were money laundering or something. What were you getting into?
Yeah, it's total dad energy, man.
Yeah. Well, dude, like I am a huge fan of your guys' show, and I'd love to talk through just some of the history of like Florida Man on Florida Man. I know you and Josh have been doing this for a while there in your guys' team. What's cool is like from my experience with it, I feel like maybe that's a good place to start, is I knew you prior to the show, like
I think so.
Coming out. What year did you guys launch the show?
2017.
Okay, so maybe like we were kind of close, and I think we really started to hang out and become friends, like maybe right prior to us moving away and moving to Pennsylvania and all that. But what's cool was like I knew you. We were homies. We had moved away, and I did not listen to podcasts at all at this moment. It was just like listen to music, whatever. And I started working a job where I had this 30-minute commute, and sometimes due to traffic, because we're in the capital city, like it could be like an hour.
Yeah.
And so I was like, man, I was thinking of you. I was like, oh, I should check out his podcast. He's like he's a homie. And it just got me hooked from there. And the fun part is it was just like, it broke up like the monotony of my drive. It was like, made me laugh. It was fun, put me in a good mood before I went into work. And so that was my experience, honestly, like listening into Florida Man on Florida Man, and then kind of branching out from there, and eventually someday getting the courage to start my own show too. So
it's so cool, man. And I appreciate you saying all that.
Yeah.
I think it's like I tend to, and we can circle back around to the show, but I do separate myself from the project a little bit mentally, I think, just to keep myself sane. And so it doesn't normally feel real until a homie is like, oh, I listen. Then I'm like, oh, Bert, you don't have to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's my initial response, because I always forget that, like, oh, it's out there for people to hear, even though it's doing well, like it's still kind of hard for me to fathom sometimes.
Yeah. That like your homies are listening to it, not just in a like supportive way. It's like, oh, I love Wayne. But it's like, oh no, I actually genuinely enjoy the show. Like this is how I want to spend my free time.
It's an investment because I like I said, I was a musician my whole life, and so I still am, but not professionally any longer. But if you're showing somebody a song, it's like, hey, worst case scenario, if you hate it, you lost 3 minutes of your life.
Yeah.
Like showing somebody your podcast is like, do you have an hour?
Do you have an hour
Do you
to
have
just
an hour
hear
to
my
waste?
thoughts?
Yeah, to hear me ramble.
Hope you love this humor.
Yeah.
You know? Oh, dude. Yeah. It is unique. Like obviously now, like having this show and this being pretty early on in like the launch of it and like, you know, getting this out to people. I feel some of those things, even just early on. It's like, I'm curious when my friends are like, oh man, I listened to it and I loved it. It's like, it does feel like it's like, oh man, you didn't have to do that. But it's cool to also see this is something that people enjoy. Like for you guys, maybe let's take it back to the beginning. Like even kind of before like your homies were starting to get into it and listening to it. Like how did this idea for a show like kind of come about between you and your friends?
Yeah, man. So we all were doing music for a very long time. We actually kind of met doing some creative projects in high school. Josh and I went to high school together. And so when the band broke up, we wanted to be home with our kids. You know, we wanted to have kids. We didn't have kids at the time. We wanted to start a family. And so we were just kind of home and not traveling. And he was like, man, like if we don't have something, we're not going to ever see each other. You know, and that was like a fear of like, how do dads make friends? You know what I mean? Like, and so because we were on the road so much, like we didn't really have a large friend group of like guys locally, at least.
Yeah.
And so we had this idea of starting a show because podcasting at the time was kind of this hot thing. And he said, what if we call it Private School Boys? Because we both go to private school and we have a lot of funny stories from our private school.
Yeah.
And but then when we started thinking about it, we were like, man, longevity wise, we've got maybe 10.
There's only so many
stories
you have. Yeah.
And so we even had like a mock-up. I'm actually just remembering this, a mock-up, like a little design we had. And it was awful. And then when that got scratched, I think we were so desperate to find a reason to hang out. He actually texts me and he goes, hey, what about Florida Man? He goes, it's like this new meme situation where people make fun of Florida and it's kind of crazy. And he goes, it's low hanging fruit. And I just kind of said yes without even thinking about it. I was like, yeah, man, like we're just going to get together on Wednesdays and record.
Let's just do it. Because you're probably not thinking, maybe you're not thinking at the time, like
I wasn't at all
long term, like today.
Not at all. I didn't think anyone would listen. I didn't think it would surpass any of the success we had in music. Because at the time, the band had only been broken up for a couple years. And so I was still kind of riding on that where I was like, oh, like I'll tell my kids some cool tour stories someday, you know, from being on the road. And so we started the show. We had some interest meetings with some folks that we knew at our old record label and that kind of stuff. And that was, I believe, the end of 2017. And yeah, man, the rest is kind of history because it kind of got away from us, man. Like I said, I went from expecting no one to listen to we may be in over our head.
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit too. Like 2017, the world of, I mean, because again, I listened to my first podcast, you guys, in like 2021.
Wow, yeah.
And so like I was aware that they were out, but what was the field like, I guess, like in 2017?
No, that's a great question. So it was very niche. So there were podcasters who, I guess the best comparison for me would be like public radio. Public access television.
Sure.
Things that were very niche, very direct to their audience, and they wouldn't know whether or not their show was blowing up or successful at all because the same folks would just reoccurringly listen to it, right? So if you were into motorcycles, you would find your motorcycle podcast, and that's your podcast, right?
Sure.
They weren't trying to branch out. And then Joe Rogan comes on the scene, and that's even to this day who everybody compares us to. So if we get invited to speak somewhere or if we are doing an event or whatnot, usually the event planner will go like, do you guys know Joe Rogan? Or like, where are you at in comparison to Joe Rogan? And which is funny because Joe Rogan is what I would call like the king of kings here in the industry. And then, you know,
it set some sort of standard.
It did set a standard. And then you've got, I think on average, like 1,000 new shows a day, which you would put that kind of at the bottom of the scale. And we're in this weird place where we have no peers, but we're not Joe Rogan.
Yeah, right.
And so at that time when we launched, we were very comfortable watching from afar and just having fun with our friends. And then, we didn't have anything to kind of measure it by or even against. And next thing we know, we started getting a ton of like mail and like followers. And then we were just like, oh, like,
Yeah.
I guess this is working out. And then it became like, now what do we do?
Man, yeah. What was the first couple of like episodes like? Were you guys like super planned out? Like, obviously, if you're listening today, and if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to Florida Man on Florida Man, I'd almost encourage you to like pause and just go listen to that. Come back. But no, but seriously, after this, go listen to one of their episodes, because you guys have a great rhythm now of like the show, and especially for me listening to it weekly, like I love it, and I also know what to expect in some ways.
Sure.
Like in the style, like certain segments and stuff like that. But like back then, did you guys still have that? How has that evolved? Like, what was the original planning like?
Yeah, so we still have 3 segments. We're a segmented show. Like the opening is always like a cold open, and it goes right into headlines, which is Florida Man News. The middle section is a bit heady. It's for longtime fans, but it's called the Icebreaker, and it's like games are fun, kind of quizzes stuff.
Yeah.
And at the end, some kind of historic story. So 3 sections. The reason why we started off with that in episode 1 is because we didn't know how to podcast. We didn't ask anybody for help. We were just music guys, So we just said, how can we keep this easy? Well, that's right. It's easier to write 3 10-minute sections than it is to write a 30-minute episode.
Yeah.
And so we would write these smaller sections, just like you would break down a math problem. It was easier.
Yeah.
And and so to answer your question as to what the early episodes were like, terrible. I mean, if I were to go, I remember being so proud of them at the time. But going back, if you put a gun to my head and like said, dude, I want you to listen through episodes 1 through 50, I would be like, tell my family goodbye, because I
love them.
It's tough, bro. Like, it's so tough to hear.
Sure.
But yeah, we didn't have we didn't have anyone to really talk to about it, and so, but the show itself essentially, dude, honestly hasn't changed in 6 years. That's
wild, man. And it seems like unknowingly, I feel like you guys created such a great model. So here's how, at least for me, and I'm sure everybody has like different experiences with the kind of podcast that they listen to or the frequency or whatever. I have certain podcasts for like I listen based on mood.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Yep.
I have my ones that I listen to if like I'm into like the feeling like true crime or like haunted whatever. I have ones like Rogan, if I'm wanting to like learn or even sometimes like laugh or whatever.
Right.
So there's different segments. You guys, I love listening to your show because I feel like there's parts of it that hit every piece of that.
Oh,
like there's the stories, there's the fun, there's actually the history at the end. And so that's what I feel like. I don't know if you guys realize, I mean, I'm sure you do, but that's what like keeps me engaged too. It's like, oh man, it's cool how it varies and it all also flows together like so well.
Thank you for saying that. I will say, because you're speaking directly to an insecurity of mine, which as a creator is it inconsistent to a fault, right? So we have a 3-section show where each section's noticeably different. So I would say one insecurity that I still have about our show is that too much? Like, is it, and so I think the fans have answered overwhelmingly so that it's not too much, but that is something, again, like, you notice your own flaws in the mirror, and that's what I tend to notice is we're different than other shows. But at this point, it's like, if it's not broken, like, why fix it?
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, I feel like we're all gonna be the harshest critics of ourselves, right?
100%, yeah.
Like, I think about my show now, and like the thought that I have, and that was kind of the initial fear of like, hey, going out and doing this is like, who wants to listen to me for like 45 minutes or
That's
2
a
an
great
hour?
question to ask.
Yeah, it is a great question to ask.
Yeah.
Like, and what I've also found too, which is encouraging, is like friends like you guys that are doing it, like we talked about at the beginning too, but like, I've realized there's sometimes where I'll put on a pod, whether it's Rogan or any other one that's like a, like we talked about, top of the line or whatever, or like any other podcast, is like, sometimes it's just nice to like hear like the conversation or to learn a little bit. We've talked about this before, dude. One of the most encouraging podcasts for me, like too, in doing this was one of like Theo Vaughn's podcasts.
Yeah, of course.
It was one where he interviewed like a New York City garbage man.
Yes.
And dude, I locked into that podcast, and it was like an hour and a half or something like that. But it was just so unique to me of like dude, a life that I'll never understand, right? Like I'll never go be a New York City garbage man
right.
or like understand those experiences.
Yep.
But that was kind of the motivator for me in this show was like, hey, I'd love to share some experiences of people that like you or I may never understand, but it's cool to hear about, you know?
It is cool and it's healthy, I think, because, you know, it's escapism in its truest form. To where it's like, I can't live this life, but I can get a glimpse of it.
Yeah.
While I am, you know, needing a distraction. There's a show that I watch on YouTube, and I'm not even going to try. I forget the title of it, but it's this gentleman who moved to Japan from America, and he does these day in the life videos of different.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Paolo in Tokyo, I think is his name. But he basically shows like, you know, the day in the life of a firefighter or you know, a grocery store clerk in Japan.
Yeah.
And that's my escapism. That's what I watch when I'm needing to veg out is, let me see what life is like for you. And I think podcasts play into that because it makes listeners feel like they're part of a conversation when they're alone. And you know, COVID obviously kind of blew that up, right? Everybody was alone.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, man, it's a healthy form of entertainment for a lot of folks.
For sure, man. And that's my hope for this show, as I'm sure like your guys' show too, is that this would be like a fun experience, like
I
overall,
think so, yeah.
whether it's like you're learning or whether you're laughing, you know, like it's a fun experience to hear maybe a little bit, like you said, like it's escapism, like learning about a different like lifestyle, a different career or whatever.
Yeah.
But dude, what's cool, like even though like going back to this a little bit, like that Florida man was kind of just like a passing, like, hey, this is something we could talk about. Dude, you chose a topic that will never stop giving you guys just, you know, headlines and information. Dude.
So one thing about our show, and I don't know if this means anything to a lot of people, but we turn episodes around in 1 week. So we've been on a 1 week on, 1 week delivery schedule for 6 years, and we've only taken a vacation twice, and so which is problematic. But you know, the reason why we're able to do that is because the news is fresh every single week, and we want it to be that way for our listeners, right? So in order for us to give them the newest headlines or the newest topics, we kind of have to track on Monday and release it, you know, less than 7 days later. Yeah. And so, like you said, it's low-hanging fruit. Florida Man is going to do what Florida Man's going to do because he's been doing it for thousands of years. And when you really look at it from a historic perspective, there's something in the water here, and it's not quitting anytime soon. So for us, we stumbled upon a gold mine accidentally. I wish we could take credit for it and go, man, we just planned this out so well. And was not the case at all. It was accidental. And then I think God kind of breathed on it in a special way, and now we are here just trying to steward it. But yeah, man, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, dude. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've heard that obviously Florida Man is going to do wild things, but the real reason why like these stories are available is because of like a really old law in Florida, right? That's like was just never taken away. So
it's called the Sunshine State Law, or the Sunshine, like a transparency law, essentially. And there are other states that have it. I do think it is more than half of the reason why. Yeah, because essentially, in other states, if you commit a crime, there's a chance no one will ever find out about that crime.
Right. Because there's certain privacy, right?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Florida has none of that. And in fact, they have the opposite, where they are compelled to report on what's happening.
Yeah.
And so if I were to, I'll give you an example of one of the headlines on our show recently. A guy found an alligator outside and he hog-tied it to his gate.
Yeah.
That was all over the news. Every media outlet in our state covered that story. This guy is you know, he wouldn't stand out in the crowd if you lined up 100 people. Yeah. He just did something silly, and now the whole world knows who he is. That happens 100 times a day here in our state.
Crazy.
And so because of the compelling nature of how we report media and crimes here in Florida, and then you pair that with the heat, you pair that with whatever kind of ancient energy is in the water and the sand, and then you got a recipe for you know, disaster.
Dude, I think it was like some show or something that I listened to before that was explaining it like there was a time where it was such low hanging fruit for other states to report on as like in the section of their newspaper that was like kind of gags, you know what I mean? Like funny stuff. Like they knew, like just a random example, like the state of New York, like a New York newspaper knew that they could call a random place in Florida. And this may be not true. Maybe we need to fact check this later, but they could call a random place in Florida and say like, hey, you know, we heard about something with a gator. What happened with the gator? And they would have to legally share the stories that happened that day or that week or whatever about gators. So they would just be full access to all these crazy Florida man stories that may also be happening in Georgia, Alabama, wherever. But it's just like free information for them to kind of ride with.
Yeah, and maybe this is a case of me just repping my home team. But I do think it happens more here. Even just per capita, look at how many folks live here. In the space that we have.
Even lately.
80,000 people moved to Polk County, which is where we are from, last year. 1,000 people a day moved to Florida. That's a very, very stressful statistic, but it's not new. I mean, people have been coming to Florida to vacation and die for 100 years. In fact, in frontier times, you could come here when the country was still developing. You can come to Florida and get free land because the only people that were here were natives and prisoners.
I remember reading about that. One of our good friends also kind of like created a book about Lakeland.
Yes.
Paige Wagner. Incredible book.
Incredible.
The people who live there. And like there's a part in there where she was, it's a story synopsis there of like Lakeland, but like that was basically like free for all.
Yep,
like if you
it was.
Like you move down here, you could just be like, this is mine.
This is my land now.
Yeah.
And then the trade-off was you could possibly die. You know what I mean? Like that was the trade-off. And so I say to folks all the time,
whether it was like people or gators or something's gonna
exactly.
Get you. Yeah.
And I think and it is just a matter of education, like educating folks who maybe don't know. But it's like, when people complain about our state, it's typically one of like four things, and all of those things have always happened here, right? So we didn't have traffic clearly 200 years ago, but we did have folks from all around the world moving here. That has not changed at all.
Sure.
And so while we do kind of make fun of our state, we also rep our state pretty hard because there's a lot of beautiful, not just scenery, but just stories and history here.
Oh, yeah.
And so to kind of circle back around to one of the original questions, early on, I don't think we realized or anticipated how much we were going to be put kind of on our heels defending the state. Especially as the show grew and we started getting the attention of politicians and news agencies and legacy media is kind of dying. And so they were kind of turning, their hatred on us and then finding ourselves going, hey, we're not an expert of anything, bro. We just wanted to hang out. And now we have this show. You know what I mean?
Well, that is something. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. Like you guys, like from what I'm understanding, you guys started the show as a way to just like hang out with your homies.
Yes.
It's like we just get to talk and we're just going to record it.
Yeah.
And hopefully somebody listens.
Right.
To flash forward, like, you're having to like potentially defend yourself. I mean, not potentially, you guys are like against politicians or whatever. Like what was like, I in my seat right now with the show starting off and being young like this, I cannot fathom, and if that will ever happen someday, but like being at a point where it's like, oh no, I got to defend myself for stuff that we like, jokingly said or whatever. Yeah.
I thought, cause, and this is what I love about my co-host Josh and myself is that, we always make every effort to prioritize people, and especially in our everyday life. And Josh is one of the kindest folks I've ever met in my entire life.
Very true. Yeah.
And so we never intentionally want to sit out and shine a negative light on anybody or hurt anybody's feelings. And so for us early on, the fear was, man, what if we accidentally say the wrong thing and hurt somebody? Because then you have hundreds of hours of yourself online, plenty to comb through and find a mistake, right? So what we didn't anticipate was A, the amount of support we would get, but B, the amount of like political backlash for things that are clearly in jest. And then there were other times where we've reported on stuff, that were that had real ramifications. And you learn as you go, man. I mean, like all we can do is surround ourselves with the smartest people that we know and just be honest and try our best. But I don't think there's any book on podcasting that we could have read that would have made us
Yeah.
go like, oh man, we're prepared for that now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, the only thing that had to happen to get to that point is just obviously you guys built up a following.
Sure,
Like
yeah.
there's enough
Yeah.
people listening to your guys' podcast that when you report on something,
Yeah.
and I've listened for like a couple years now, and I'm sure as everybody else that's listened to or going to after this too is like a test, like 90% of the time you guys are joking around.
Right.
You know
Yep,
what I mean?
yep.
Like you're just having a good time.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
you'll say things that like you probably don't even necessarily maybe even mean or whatever
No,
the case
yeah.
is. But like, or you're just reporting on real stories. Like this is what happened.
Right.
And like, I also love, like, there's been times where you guys haven't gone into deeper detail because you're just reporting the facts about like
Right.
a story. Right.
Yeah, because we don't ever, I wouldn't say that we're nonpartisan. I mean, clearly, I think it's hard to be creative and to not have your personal beliefs at least bleed into the project somewhat.
Sure.
But I will say this, Josh and I, and the more you listen to the show, the more it's easier to see this, but we're essentially playing very exaggerated characters of ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you know me personally, there's a lot of stuff I say on the show that I would probably never say in real life, and because it's just funny, Like
Yeah.
I think I said the word war criminal,
More times. Yeah.
145 times in a year. I've never used that in my day-to-day talk ever.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's a character. It's all theater. I think that's what most art is. The issue is some folks can't tell the difference between theater and reality, and if that theater doesn't align with what their worldviews are or how they believe, they tend to lash out.
Yeah.
It's tough to be human, man, and I don't fault them for it, but we do tend to be on the other side, the receiving end of it.
Well, and I think part of what you just said is what makes like podcasts great. Like
Yeah.
what you guys are doing is like what you would probably do if the mics were off. Just
Sure,
like
yeah.
joking around
Yeah,
and
goofing.
having fun. And I think that there's also a reality to like, that's why people listen to shows like this, because man, like there's something in us too. It's like you get to be a fly on the wall on just friends having a fun conversation and laughing together.
Yeah, it feels
and even if
voyeuristic.
you're not like contributing, there's something in you that just makes you happy, or that just makes you feel like warm, or whatever the case may be. And
Yeah.
it's like that's cool to feel like while you're just, going for your daily commute, putting on a podcast that just makes you happy. You get to hear, whether it's people that you'll ever meet or not. Like that's what you guys are providing for people.
Thank you for saying that, but trying to bring a levity to folks, because like I said earlier, it's tough to be human, and it is. We live in times where, it's not hard to find things to be stressed out about. If you remove every outside factor, and it's just you and your family and your inner circle, in your neighborhood, you're gonna have the basic necessities that are gonna stress you out. Whether that is, feeding yourself or your friends, or paying your bills, or whatever your responsibilities tend to be. And then when you factor in the fact that we're all chronically online and we've been given so much information nonstop, you begin to get these almost like false anxieties that you have no responsibility to even know about, much less solve.
Yeah.
And yet we're just, we're receiving it every single day, day in and day out. It's difficult, man. And so what we try to bring is a levity to folks to go, hey, if you want to escape for an hour, that's what we're trying to do, is to give you a safe place to laugh and have fun. I think the downside is, as the show has grown, there's also this responsibility for us when we receive something that hasn't been reported, and it's vile. It's people in power doing vile things. We have a responsibility to go, either we're going to cover it or we're going to send it to somebody who will cover it.
Sure.
And so then it becomes this, people aren't tuning in to laugh. They're tuning in to go, well, let me see if they're confirming what I, the things I already believe about them. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a tricky minefield sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and I bet that's just kind of made you guys had to even just mature as podcasters, right?
Yeah.
Of like thinking like, hey,
And people.
And people too.
Yeah.
Like, it's even like I've said in this short time that this show has been, on, and I've been doing these like, shows and all that. I've matured just in the way I'm thinking about like a conversation, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like getting like learning more about someone. Like you guys have had to go from a place of like, oh, this is fun conversation, to now, hey, this is fun conversation, but there's also like a weight to it. If I just flippantly say this, there could be like there could be some consequences to what I say.
Yeah, and that's something that, man, it's I think every entertainer has that to a degree where it's like, you can't. There is a responsibility you have. You can't just say whatever you want. But I think when you tune into a comedy show, I think there has to be a little bit of leeway. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of if I like say a yo mama joke to my co-host, right?
Yeah.
It would feel absurd for someone to go, man, how rude of him to criticize his best friend's mother. Right? That would feel silly. But the equivalent of that happens like once an episode, and every single week somebody will write in and be like, I can't believe you said that. And it's usually a different person. I mean, like it's not like we have constant critics. It's like it's just different people listening at different times and going, wow, what a controversial statement. It's like, homie, like and you get the rhythm of it when you listen for longer. You get the rhythm of how things are going, and it's hard to see that.
That's so interesting to me. Not just like, obviously, I think what's interesting is that the person type that goes the extra step to send in a comment like that, but also that like for statistically for that to happen, that means you guys have such a large like listening base that like out of the 1,000 or however many thousands that are listening, at least one person is going to be like, hey, that hurt my feelings, That is, and it's funny, man, because like if it's up to me, like we were at a place where, we really can't respond to DMs anymore. I do try to sign in occasionally and it's very selfish because it blesses me in a sense. Someone wrote in recently and said that they were having brain surgery, and the doctor said, well, what do you want on? You can choose something to be on while we operate on your brain. And he goes, can you put on my favorite podcast? And he listened to us while the doctor operated on his brain. And someone else wrote in that their son was bullied in school and now he's homeschooled, and his treat for doing his schoolwork is listening to our show. And there's all these things that are a blessing that I would have never known about had I not randomly jumped into our DMs and gone, let me just pick a random conversation and see what it's saying. Now, I say that to say it bothers me because I never anticipated the show blowing up the way it did, the way it has. And I thought I was always going to be able to have one-on-ones with all my listeners. Yeah. To be able to go like, hey, I'm so sorry you're walking through this, or thank you for listening or whatever. And now that that's been kind of removed, I'm grateful for the show, but there is a point where I go, man, now it feels almost not personal at all. You know what I mean? And if I could, our pastor, we go to the same church, and our pastor says this frequently, I would love to have coffee with every single one of you. Yeah. And I genuinely feel the same way about our show. I was like, man, if I could, I would love to meet every single person and just have a one-on-one of how'd you find the show and what's life like for you. But you can't, man. And in the same vein, you can't control what people say about you. And that's just what we're still learning, Yeah. Have you guys found any ways to, because this is helpful for me, dude, in a lot of ways, and very true. Like I look up to you and your guys' show as like a standard for like, you've been so encouraging to me as the show has launched and been going. Like, what are ways that you've been able to connect with your viewers? Yeah, I can't respond to every single DM, but like, what are ways that you've been able to help make like your viewers feel special, I guess,
That's a great question. We do try to do listener submitted questions and letters where we will, shout people out and send them merch. And there's one thing that one of my mentors, Christina Gard, says. She says, just because we can't help everybody doesn't mean we shouldn't help somebody.
Sure.
And that kind of scales it for me, where it's like, we can't respond to all of our listeners, but we can respond to some. And there are even some nights where while I'm sitting and watching television, it's like, okay, if Love Island is on, I can surely respond to DMs at the same time.
Well, that's quality television.
It's quality television. Yeah. It speaks to my spirit.
Right.
No, but I do think that's part of it. I think the other part of it is just being consistent, because eventually you learn what your listeners are there for. Yeah. And if you can be consistent in that, and you can go, hey, like, this is what they like, we're going to keep making it. And there's this weird line that I think every artist has, yourself included, and from you to John Mayer or whoever it is, like, we're like, you're writing you're writing music, or you're writing a podcast, or maybe you're painting a picture, and there's this desire in all of us to go, I'm going to try something different this time. Yeah. Right. But then when you have a fan base, you also have this responsibility to go, well, wait a minute, like they tune in for a reason, right? Sure. Yeah. So it's this balance of being true to yourself as an artist, but at the same time realizing that the folks who have elevated you and put you on a platform, there are things about you that they like. And if you just rip that away without, giving them an explanation, it can be painful for everybody involved.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think being consistent for the listeners is one of the most important things is they can tune in every Wednesday morning and go, I at least know what the next hour of my life is going to be like.
Yeah. And I appreciate that too, because like, I feel like I'm curious. I don't know. Like, I feel like that probably happens more in music. At least the podcasts that I listen to, like, have stayed fairly consistent, I think. But I've listened to bands before where it's like, oh man, this was like what I loved about you, and it took a very different turn. And it's, you get that point as a fan where you're like, oh, I understand. This is like creative, freedom, and you're trying something new and all that, but I missed the OG. You know what I mean?
It's a trope, especially with music. And I always say to my homies who are still in that industry, it's like, hey, dude, your next album needs to be what your fans expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that little country thing you're feeling right now, where you want to be like Post Malone and switch it up a little bit, you're not Post Malone, so you can't get away with it.
Right.
So write those out, get them out of your soul, and go play them at a coffee shop. You know what I mean? And then write your record in a way that your fans can appreciate.
Have a separate project.
Yeah. Like
sure.
Side projects are healthy for you, homie.
But man, that is the trend right now. Country music.
It's weird, isn't it? It's hot. I mean, growing up, it's all I had. With my hee-haw family. But
same, dude. Yeah, I grew up and it wasn't the cool thing. It was just like what like a lot of my family listened to. Like I remember going over to my grandma's house on the weekends, and she'd have some like old stuff like, Randy Travis, stuff like that playing as she was doing stuff around the house. And it's just interesting now that it's like, oh, that's turning around. It's like, oh, this is the cool thing to listen to.
Oh, dude, it's funny. I still find it kind of odd as, and not to really date myself here, but when I was a kid, like, if you were a hardcore country fan and that's what you listened to, there was a chance you were going to say some stuff that could get you arrested these days. Whereas like now these kids will drive by in their dad's Beamer and they're blaring like, Morgan Wallen, or whatever. And it's just like, it's funny how trends work, man.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, dude, circling back around to your show, I think one thing that's so encouraging is just how good you are at it. And I want to say this, man, like not. And I've been saying this to a lot of people lately. Now that you've have been launching and working on this, is I've been on a lot of shows. Like and that's and that's a point of privilege. I understand that, but you get to see everything from the best of the best to the worst of the worst. I have never in my life, seen a show start where yours started and it feel like it's been around for a long time and it feel like it's been around forever. And you just have a natural gift at that, and I wish like the way my monkey brain works is like, how can I connect the dots to explain why Alec is so good at this? You know what I mean? Like but you are, man, and it's just something that is I think the people that are tuning in to listen to your show, these folks desperately. They love what you're doing and they desperately want you to continue. And I just want to say, man, like it's been so great watching you do this, man. To see it go from the dream stage to the reality stage is as honest to God, as a creative, I would say a top 10 experience for me to go, man, it's just cool to see this happen. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, like to give some like backstory to that, dude, this was, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily call them like New Year's resolutions that my wife and I do, but we definitely like at the beginning of the year, like sit down and put goals. Like, man, this is stuff we'd love to see. Like, part of mine, like one goal that I had was like, I would love for my son, like, and just being honest right now, I'd love for my son to extend his prayer life. Like, of course, what that means. Like he was, like a year ago as a 2-year-old, he's saying, Jesus, thank you for today. Amen.
Yeah, right.
And that was like every single
That's
prayer.
me as a 40-year-old.
Right. Yeah. Let's get this food.
Yeah.
But in this year, I have seen him, add a little bit more. Thank you for my baby brother,
That's
stuff
cool.
like that. But part of that was like, and this was kind of spur of the moment. I kind of dropped this like a bomb on Madeline. I was like, I really think I'd like to do a podcast.
Yeah.
Like, it's not because like I had this feeling like so many people wanted to hear my voice. It was just like, man, it was partly like, I feel like I would enjoy doing this. Mm-hmm. And also like, I just have like, my idea is just to be like genuine who I am and like find some really interesting people like yourself to just like talk through like what they do and like their life and their stories. And like, you know, it can vary from time to time, because what I loved about shows that I'd listened to was like, I can sense someone that's not being themselves, and I can sense like authenticity. And I like,
for sure.
I love like, just like, oh man, I don't care if you're super nerdy or whatever the case is. I feel like I'm super nerdy, dude. I'm deep into the Game of Thrones books, dude.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, but like I just love like hearing authenticity, and that's what was my goal. So like you know, in prepping and planning the show, dude, like I definitely like, you know, we're later on in the year, like now that everybody's like listening and hearing this took months of me mentally getting there. And part of that's on me, dude. I put a lot of anxieties on myself, and that's something that I always work through. But like, just like thinking about like, man, I want to do this right. I want to do this like well for somebody. Like I want to give somebody something that was worth their time, you know? And so, dude, I genuinely like appreciate that, man. I'm going for it. Something that you told me from the beginning has been like the motivation that I've kind of gone by in just podcasting, because there's someone I look up to a lot in this, is like, if I don't quit, I win. Or if I don't give up, I win.
Yep, 100%.
You know?
Yep.
And so just like keeping on going, man. Like every week, and you know, from like hopefully listen to the show and all that stuff, like every week is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But who's on the show? But man, it's unique all the same, you know?
For sure, man. And dude, like I again applaud you for doing that. And you know, the entry price, I guess, the entry fee to everything is embarrassment, right? So
sure,
like I picked up golf a year and a half ago. The entry fee is embarrassment, right? Picking up podcasting, the entry fee is embarrassment. That's just how life is. And so folks are so afraid of embarrassment that they won't do things that they have genuinely desired to do. And there's this. I'm really into this artist right now called McGee, and he's just a great songwriter. But he has this line in this song called "Are You Looking Up?" And he says, you know, that basically you're sitting at home wasting away, you know, all these gifts essentially when there's somebody out there playing to nobody every night. Like there's somebody out there gigging out and playing into an empty room every single night, and you're sitting at home just uber talented, uber gifted, not pursuing anything. And if I'm being honest with you, man, like, and I don't mean this in a flippant way, I say this all the time. If the show were to die tomorrow, I would mourn for a little bit, but then I would just start something else.
Yeah.
Because what terrifies me is wasting it. Is sitting at home and going like, man, there's more, and I'm letting it go because of my lack of drive or whatever. So that's why I applaud you, man, is because taking it from the dream stage to the reality stage in less than a year is actually kind of insane. It's actually kind of insane. And you would be hard pressed to point at other examples where folks did that successfully. And I think, you know, for the foreseeable future, you're going to be my example for that when I talk to other folks. It's just wonderful.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I appreciate that, dude. Yeah, I'm super encouraging, man. I like, yeah, I'm having a lot of fun doing it, man. And that's the thing that I think like you're saying too. It's like, you know, like this is my form. I feel like, especially when I was like saying that to Madeline at the beginning of the year, like this feels like my form of creativity. I feel like everybody has their form. Like I'm a musician. I've played guitar for years, and I was not to the degree you guys were, what was in the band scene for a while.
Sure.
And like, you know, was looking for like, man, I'd love a creative outlet. And this just like made sense for me. And the thing I would encourage people too was like something that I had to work within myself was like, man, I just got to do it.
Yeah.
I just got to go for it. I got to quit talking about it, and I got to start putting some action. And that's not to say like, you know, beat yourself up if you can't do it in a month.
Yeah.
But like do little baby steps. It's like, cool. Okay. Today I'm going to think about what would it look like? I'm going to write down like, what's my ideas? Like what's the like, you know, thoughts behind my show? Like what this going to look like? And then, you know, moving towards like, okay, what's the first step? Like, how am I going to put this like in a recording?
Right.
So, and dude, I don't like, you know, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe there are some people who are listening to this episode and you've thought about starting a podcast or thought about starting something creative like that. What is something that you would encourage somebody looking to get into this field from the get-go? Like what's something you encourage them in?
Yeah, I think the fee here from a realistic standpoint, when it comes to gear and whatnot, is actually relatively low compared to other hobbies, especially other creative hobbies.
Sure,
I mean, there are shows that I know of that are successful, and I'm not going to out them in case they don't want me to say this, that record on their phone and they release it, and they're doing okay for themselves.
Yeah.
And so my point being is, if you have a way to record and a way to access the internet, you can start a show. So if you want to do it, don't wait until you have the perfect gear, and don't wait until you have the perfect setup, and don't wait, just get out there and do it. And then you can be like us and go back and delete your earlier episodes. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like we have 3 episodes that are floating around in the ecosphere somewhere. That thankfully, I don't think they're going to come out at this point because we have a decent following and no one's ever found them. But they were terrible.
Yeah,
they were awful. My wife, biggest cheerleader, she's amazing. She's a saint. Even she heard those and was like, "Yeah, I'm not sure, homie." You know what I mean? Like, this is your calling. So I would just say, honestly, keep your chin down and go for it. And then the second thing would be consistent.
Yeah.
Like, once you decide to do it, make sure that you do it at the same time every single week or every other week, whatever your schedule is, because people appreciate consistency. They just appreciate knowing that you're going to drop what you're going to drop, and when it's going to happen. And that's been, honestly, man, like, consistency is king
for sure
for us, and I think that applies to any show, just to get out there and do it.
Yeah, and something. I mean, I don't. I'm so new into this too. I feel like to offer a form of like addition to that feels a little silly, but like just something that I've felt lately too is like thinking about guests on my show and things like that. Like, everybody's got a story to tell.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Like, sometimes I think you can get into this thought of like, oh, it needs to be like a big name or like, a big type of career or role. It's like, dude, some of the most interesting stories that I've heard from people are just like the people you would like not assume that from,
You pass them by on the street.
Yeah, pass them by on the street that just have like the wildest life stories.
Yeah. The example you gave earlier is with Theo and the guy that's a sanitation worker up in New York. And I think that's the thing, man, is as complex as your life is, as difficult as things are for you, as roller coaster, emotions come and go throughout your day. It's the same for every single person that you walk by. Every single human being is having this like myriad of experiences all at the same time that you are. And so like it's, so just hearing somebody's perspective and their story, it can be grounding for you and life-changing all at the same time, because it can allow you to go, whoa, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Or maybe things aren't as bad for me as I thought they were. You know what I mean? And so it's it's actually incredible to see these opportunities open up for folks in this day and age with the advancements in technology and creativity.
For sure, man. Well, with 1 more minute left,
man.
I'd love to hear, like, obviously maybe provide for some people who don't know about Florida Man on Florida Man, how they can get connected to you and the show, but also just maybe something encouraging as we head out.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's FMOFM.com, FMOFM.com. It's the acronym for our show, Florida Men. It's plural, Florida Men on Florida Man, singular. And it's a lot of fun, man. But I would just say, honestly, to anyone who's listening, that I think everyone has that moment. Everyone who has done something that they're proud of, they have that moment where they can look back and go, this is when I decided to do it. This is when I decided to pull the trigger and make that happen. And I promise you this, the vast majority of the things you're anxious about aren't going to happen. And if you just put your foot out there and put the kind of the effort into it that you need to put into it, it could change your life.
Yeah.
It really can change your life. And honestly realize that you're doing it for you. And your kids will thank you. Everybody needs a hobby. Worst case scenario, you got a banger of a hobby. So whatever that looks like for you, if you're listening and you go, man, I want the encouragement to do it. As blasé as it sounds, do it.
Go for it.
Go for it, man. But yeah, appreciate you, homie.
Thanks, man. Super encouraging.
Yeah.